Shuttle tatting has a bit of a reputation for being difficult to start, but in my experience, it's actually the finishing that most new tatters struggle with. Dealing with those pesky thread ends can be more difficult and frustrating than getting the piece finished in the first place. My name is Sparrow, and I am a professional lace maker and shuttle tatting instructor with over 2 decades of experience. Today, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite techniques for hiding thread ends so that you can get a clean, professional finish on all of your tatted lace projects. For this tutorial, I will be using Elizabeth tatting thread in a size 3 in these 2 colors and my standard 2 shuttle setup. I also have my embroidery scissors and my favorite needles, which I will get into the details of later in the video. The easiest method for dealing with thread ends is to avoid having to sew them in whenever possible. When adding in new thread, you can tat over the tails to create a smooth transition, hiding them underneath the stitches alongside the core thread. While you can do this by pulling the tail through each individual half stitch as you go, there's actually a much faster and more efficient way. After loading up your shuttle with your new thread and wrapping it to start a new ring, make a temporary extra half wrap with the new thread, anchoring the shuttle on your pinky. This is just to keep the tension on the thread for the next step. Trim the previous thread end to about 6 to 8 inches and then finger tat with the tail to make a single unflipped stitch on the temporary second wrap. Place the working thread into position in your pinch and tat away with the old tail tied to the new thread. By using the unflipped double stitch rather than a regular knot, you can still adjust the thread as needed because it will slide. After closing the ring, untie the end and give it a gentle tug to make sure that everything is situated snugly. The tail left from the new thread can then be hidden under the next section. Here, I'm using my unconventional method of making unflipped chains with my shuttle too, but it will also work if you are using a more traditional shuttle and ball chain method. Again, once the section is completed, give the thread tail a gentle tug to make sure it will lay nicely. I do recommend working a few more sections of your pattern before trimming these ends to avoid any unfortunate scissor-related mix-ups. This technique also works well to hide the ball or shuttle 2 thread when ending a piece with a ring, leaving you with only one thread end to sew in at the end. These next 2 techniques are a variation on tatting over the tails when starting or ending with a chain. For both of these, it will work best if you are using my unflipped chain method. Normally, when starting with a chain, I would just use the continuous thread method to avoid ends at the beginning. But if you're working with 2 colors, or if you have thread on your shuttle already that you don't want to waste, you can seamlessly start a chain and eliminate one thread end with the loop start method. Simply pull the tail end of your core shuttle thread all the way through the starting point, and then tat over the doubled thread as though it were one. Again, I recommend continuing the work for a few sections past where you drop this end before trimming it off. The double back method for ending with a chain is the same thing but in reverse. For this method, you will need to cut the core thread away from the shuttle with a very long tail. Just as with the loop start method, pull this cut end all the way through the ending point of your chain and double it back so that you have 2 core threads being treated as one. It's very important that these threads not get twisted and stay side by side. Here's what holding this looks like from the side. Using the unflipped chain method once again, tat over these doubled ends. If you are using a shuttle and ball rather than 2 shuttles, you can cut your work away from the ball and simply finger tat this last section. Once your stitches are complete, close the chain by pulling the cut end of the core thread. Go slowly and be cautious of any twist buildup. You may need to fiddle with it to adjust everything and get it to lay just right. This end can then be trimmed, leaving only one end that needs to be sewn in. This method for sewing the ends is not quite invisible, but it is quick and easy. Needle selection for this technique is not critical, so you can choose any needle with an eye large enough for your thread. If you look at the top edge of the double stitches, you'll notice that the caps of the stitches are arranged in an offset or brick-like pattern. Begin sewing by inserting the needle under the closest cap. The needle should be going in between stitches on one side and coming out in the middle of a stitch on the other. Continue sewing back and forth for as many stitches as desired. I generally prefer to go the entire length of a chain or ring, but this isn't really necessary. Once finished sewing, again give the thread a gentle tug to hide it a little bit better before trimming. Obviously, this is much less visible if your thread end color matches the section you are hiding it in. For the most secure and invisible finish, ends can be sewn underneath the stitches, following the core thread. Needle selection for this is much more critical. I prefer the Clover Gold Eye embroidery needles because they have a large eye and a slightly blunted tip, which makes it easier to get underneath the stitches. It's tempting to try and use the smallest needle size possible, but this can actually make the task more difficult. A needle's job is not only to pull the thread through, but also to open enough space for the thread to fit through. Choose a needle size that is the same width or very slightly larger than your thread. If you're using a tatting thread, you can split the tail into two smaller sections to make it even easier. One section will have 2 strands and the other section will have 1 strand. If you are really struggling, you can split this down further so that you have 3 single strand sections. Working stitch by stitch, insert your needle under both legs of the stitch and pull the thread tail through. The goal is to get the needle into the space underneath the stitches without splitting the thread. You'll get a feel for this with practice. If your tension is particularly tight, or if you have difficulty with gripping the needle, I recommend getting a pair of nylon pliers to help pull the needle through. Most of the time, I will sew these ends for at least half of a ring, or if it's a chain, the full length of the chain. Repeat for the second half of the split tail, and you're all done. As with everything, practice will make all of these techniques easier. I hope you found this video helpful in giving you the confidence to no longer dread the finishing work on your tatted lace projects. And if you'd like to see more tutorials like this in the future, don't forget to subscribe.